Today I wanted to share with you a quick take that I learned when working with a friend who's setting up a new legal practice. The goal there was to try to help somebody sort of set up a practice in which they could try new things. The first thing that we discovered and sort of learned was that the default behavior for most people when they get stressed, and especially when they're starting something new, is to just say, I'm going to just go all in. The key thing, if you're feeling that way, is to think about how can you create a buffer, and then to try to avoid emotional thinking when you have that buffer of saying, I have to do this default crazy hyperactive hive mind work to be successful. So taking a good hard look at saying, like, what is my actual buffer? What is the runway that I've created for myself? Many people are not in the position where it's an absolute all-out terror. If that's the case, then I think that there are things that you should do to look at less risky kinds of work that you could consider doing for that, right? So that is sort of the matter of returning to different kinds of jobs, specific consulting contracts or other kinds of things. But if you're dedicated to this entrepreneurial journey, how can you create an environment in which you can avoid sort of this hyperactive hive mind, probably less likely to be effective approach to things, right? And the way it's doing is like, you've got to understand your buffer, right? And then with that buffer, create the space in the beginning at least for a little bit of discovery, right? Perhaps you have to go to this all-out crazy work mode just to make ends meet, right? Then I think if that's true, you want to learn that lesson, but you want to learn that lesson having given some of the other opportunities and ways to have it be much more meaningful for you a chance to work. What does that mean? Right, so in this case, we talked about the runway they had was about 3 months, right? By 3 months, they needed to have sort of a thriving practice, so they needed to consider something else, right? They still had a sort of a 4 to 6 week buffer in which they could find something and do something, but they had a 3 week buffer to do their experiments. In that, we don't want to experiment up to the very end, right? So we want to be getting some mature processes for it. So at least the first month was ready for experimentation. What are those kinds of personal experiments? So what I'm encouraging people to sort of consider at least is that the goal is not to work in the same way, right? The goal is to prepare yourself to be a truly high performance cognitive worker. Right? And like working out at the gym, you can't just suddenly show up and you're gonna just like suddenly bench press 300 pounds, all right? You're gonna have to build up slowly to that. Is the way to do it to go in and then just work out all the time, right? No, that's not. You're gonna injure yourself, you're not gonna grow. You need to have periods in which you develop good technique, right? And then you use that technique in a safe way such that you apply it and then you rest, right? And then you come back and you continue to make iterative improvements, and then you can start to do experiments with how much rest do you really need in between in order to maximize your growth potential. And so in that setting, we said, like, great, we're going to take the next week or two to start to do some experiments to say, look, I'm going to try to build up the strength to do 4 hours, right? 4 hours of cognitive high performance work. That's the deep work stuff that Cal Newport is talking about. Why only 4 hours? Shouldn't we go for 6? Shouldn't we go for 8? Well, we know from data around deliberative practice that even super athletes, when they're doing deliberative practice, get the most benefit out if they're doing 4 hours. And when they do longer, they don't get the same necessary benefit. We'll be learning a lot for you about what it's going to look like in your industry as you do these experiments. But I would say that for the vast majority of people who are currently working in the current way, which is the hyperactive hive mind, you're going to have a lot of internal barriers and external barriers that are going to get in your way of you doing truly high performance 4 hours of work a day. And so that's why you need to build your way up to do it. How do you do that, right? So the way to do that is you need to create the time for you to be able to do that. Step one, right? That's a little bit of controlling your calendar. There's some good tools and we've got some videos that will help you do that. And it does also mean saying no to some things, right? It doesn't mean saying no always, right? Or to forever. It means saying no well, right? And that's true for others, it's true for yourself. Saying no well to others, a quick summary is like you recognize the importance of what they're bringing to you or how hard they worked on it, and then you help move them to the next step as quickly as possible and in a way that works for you. Saying no to yourself can be even harder, right? And here's where you sort of can use creative constraints and boundaries and limits to do that. The way that I've found it most helpful for me to do that is by creating a budget of some kind for myself. This works really well related to the next step, right? So imagine every day of the next week, you have a space carved out where you are rested enough to be a high performance cognitive worker. You have the materials and tools around you, and you've created the environment for yourself to do that, right? then what's left for you? Right? It's making sure that you've sequenced and structured the work for you to do it. We've talked about how to prepare well for deep work and the visualization techniques that you can use, right? But a lot of it means that you are clear for yourself that you're working on the most important priorities. So that means that you have mapped out all the things that you think you need to do, you have created an ordered sequence of those, right? You've made some basic estimates of when you're going to do it, and now you've got a great plan. For like each one of those 4 hours, it's got a job for you to do. Now, if you try to sort of overbook that or give that time away, or sort of spend it on lower or shallower work priorities, social media or other kinds of things, it's going to be much harder for you to do it. So once you have an understanding, you've given those a job, you've got a clear prioritization, you've convinced yourself that this is the most important thing, then creating the environment for you to do that work matters. In my time, and still today, I really found that I needed to reprogram my mind to help avoid a lot of the internal distractions, and that's why I was using the time box tool, why I built it, and sort of why I still use it to this day, because I get to make a commitment to longer stretches of work by using the 45-minute and above deep work timers corner. So that's a technique. What we're doing there is sort of creating this opportunity for them to do this 4 hours of deep work every day, right? So it is a battle to carve it out. We've used a bunch of different techniques by wanting them still to be accessible to customers, but by using Calendly or SavvyCal or these other tools, and using them well, which really meant that we needed to set boundaries about when people could book time. Booking appointments on the same day for you is going to be very destructive, right? And so we actually set a boundary at least 48 hours. They're still accessible to you, they'll call you if there's a problem, like if they really need it now, that'll be an interruptive one, and you would gladly step out for the customers who use that wisely. But otherwise, people can sort of book some time with you later. And then you should also limit the hours that you make available to them. Ideally, hours that are not part of your deep work schedule. For me, that's between 8 and 12, right? That's my prioritized time. I have meeting slots available from somewhere between 1 and 3 or sometimes 2 to 3:30. In general, you get a quick sense of like if that really fills up, then you need to make some other things available if it's part of your business proposition. But that's the experiment. So what would that get us, right? So that's like starting out with reasonable weights. You're going to slowly build it up. The first week, you've got a real understanding like this is going to be hard. You have to set things into practice. Maybe you need to rearrange and reprioritize. That's you just slowly doing some of the initial reps, but doing them with good form and technique. The second week, it should be much better blocked off. You've also got the time necessary to plan out all those blocks. The first week's going to be a struggle. You're like, what really is the most important thing? There's a ton of competing priorities. You need to spend a little bit of time doing that. That's the wrap time. It's why it's an hour, right? You're starting the day or ending the day, well, it can be 10, 20 minutes, but effectively planning your following week, which will give you your weekend back, right, takes time. And you've got to let your brain sort of sit and then reshuffle it and then convince yourself that that's the right plan. That's the value of it, the Friday time, right? If you haven't done it, sometime Sunday afternoon, you should try to protect that for your own personal playtime, and then Monday morning if you have to, right? So that's what the second week is really for. The second week, they should really start to be making some gains around the form. Now they're left with this ability to say like, how did that work out? Has there been tremendous backlash? Is this not working, or can I experiment to do more or less? For myself, I've sort of like sometimes said, well, you know, these tasks or these particular ones, you're going to get around 6 hours of sort of this kind of work, and then 2 hours for flex time. But even as I've been doing that, and I'm trying to do it, I find that like the 4 hours of really focused time requires a lot of energy to prepare well. And if I overdo it that day, I know that the next day I'm not going to be as high performance in those 4 hours, and so it's really just robbing myself. It also means that some of the other interstitial stuff I can use much better to balance my energy. And how does that work? Daniel Pink had really talked about the difference in people's energetic levels between and across the day, and that if you don't take those into account, the place where you have a trough can, one, feel incredibly tough and difficult, but also you'll make much poorer decisions. This is true for lawyers, it's true for people taking exams. If you don't take the time to recharge, right, then much of that day is really low performance work. People are less ethical, they have experienced decision fatigue, they're less creative, right? And that's not how you want to end your day. And that's why the days for me have really turned out to be 4 hours, as high performance work as I can make it, preparing not just for that day, but ready for the next day as well. Then I'm using some of these superpowers to recharge myself, right? And that's lunch as a superpower and exercise as a superpower, to give myself the opportunity to have 2 hours at the end of the day, which are much better. That's really important because taking care of all the shallow work, communication stuff, and when you're collaborating with others, you want to be able to bring some of your best self to that as well, right? You want to do that in a quick, fast, and efficient way so that it doesn't sort of get overwhelming. That matters a lot too. And that's why the day for me really is like, so there's 4 hours, the 2 hours of these recharge, optimization stuff, and then 2 hours of sort of like pretty good, ongoing, productive ones with good ethical decision making and virtue and good energy that I can bring to people, and then a day's wrap up. That's the experiment that we're doing together. You've got to make it work for yourself. We're going to see how it works out for my friend who's doing this new kind of way. I think they're excited about the possibility of it. I still think they'll get to sort of 6 billable hours, which will include sort of some of the shallow work time and then powerful deep work time for their clients, which I think is going to benefit all of us. Anyway, I hope this was helpful to you. The key takeaways that I'm hoping that you've got from this is that when you are planning your own work, don't fall prey to the default emotionally driven way of saying like, I have to work all out. In truth, you're not going to be able to do it. It's going to wipe you out for the following periods of days and weeks, right? And it's going to feel super stressful at a time when you have the opportunity to be brave, make some experiments for yourself to define ways to do it, and can learn some lessons from the way that I've been doing it in this flow way that have meant for really productive days, ones that are really meaningful and have the ability to sort of keep all the other things going, and in a way that keeps me healthy and is helping us to move forward. I hope that that's going to be helpful to other people in other settings as well. Thanks. Bye.